Worked. When I was 16 years old, I watched my great-grandmother carry 2 heavy buckets of water up a steep hill behind our home. She was 91 years old. I remember running after her, almost embarrassed. She smiled, thanked me, and gently shook her head. Then she said something I have never forgotten. At 16, I thought she was simply being stubborn. Now, after spending my entire life here in Japan, I realize she may have explained the greatest secret to growing old without losing your independence. Not once did she call it exercise. Not once did she count calories. She never measured her heart rate. She never joined a fitness club. She simply lived in a way that quietly challenged her body every single day. Years later, scientists began studying people just like her. They expected to find miracle foods, rare herbs, special genes. Worked instead, they found something much more ordinary. The healthiest older Japanese weren't staying strong because they exercised harder than everyone else. Most of them never exercised the way we think about exercise today. Instead, they repeated small movements every day, movements so ordinary that almost nobody noticed them, until researchers finally did. And what they discovered changed how many doctors think about aging. You see, our bodies were never designed to spend 10 hours sitting in chairs before suddenly asking them to perform for 1 hour inside a gym. They were designed to move slowly, naturally, constantly. That is exactly how my grandparents lived. My grandfather never owned running shoes. He never lifted weights. Yet when he was 87 years old, he could still kneel in his garden for hours, stand back up without using his hands, and walk home carrying vegetables for dinner. As children, we believed every grandfather could do that. Only later did I realize how unusual it had become. He looked down at the soil beneath his feet. Then he smiled. I didn't understand what he meant until many years later. Today, many people think strength comes from doing something difficult once or twice each week. My grandfather believed strength came from doing something simple every single day. That lesson has stayed with me for more than 60 years. The first movement I want to share isn't really exercise at all. In fact, many people would laugh if you called it exercise. It is simply walking, but not the hurried walking most people do today. Not walking while answering emails, not walking while staring at a phone, not walking because your watch tells you to reach 10,000 steps. My grandfather walked as though he had nowhere else he needed to be. Every morning before breakfast, he left our wooden home wearing the same old straw hat. Sometimes I secretly followed him. He wasn't trying to get somewhere. He stopped beside flowers. He watched birds. He greeted neighbors by name. Sometimes several minutes passed before he took another step. As a child, I wondered why he moved so slowly. Today, I know that slowing down changes much more than your speed. Researchers studying older Japanese adults have found that slow, mindful walking helps challenge balance, improve posture, and encourages the muscles that keep us stable to work together naturally. Every careful step teaches the brain where the body is in space. Every uneven stone reminds the ankles how to adjust. Every gentle hill wakes muscles that chairs slowly put to sleep. Perhaps that is why my grandfather never feared falling. His body practiced balance every single day. Modern life rarely gives us that opportunity. We move quickly across perfectly flat floors. Escalators replace stairs. Cars replace walking. Even when we walk, our minds are somewhere else. My grandfather once noticed me rushing toward school. He called my name. I stopped for only a moment. I laughed. He smiled. "You are not late." I didn't appreciate those words until I became older myself. Today, whenever I begin feeling anxious, I remember his voice. Slow down. Look around. Let your breathing find the same rhythm as your footsteps. Nature has never rushed. Yet somehow, everything still arrives on time. That brings me me to another memory from my childhood. Every summer morning before the sun became warm, music floated through our village. Within minutes, children, office workers, grandparents, and neighbors quietly gathered together. No one arrived carrying expensive water bottles. Nobody wore special athletic clothing. There was no competition, no winners, no losers, only movement. Together we stretched our arms toward the sky, rolled our shoulders, bent our knees, turned our bodies gently from side to side. The entire routine lasted only a few minutes. Then everyone smiled politely and continued with their day. As children, we thought it was simply another tradition. Only years later did I discover millions of Japanese people had been doing exactly the same routine for generations. It became known as Radio Taiso. Doctors admired it not because it was difficult, but because it was consistent. Gentle movement after waking prepares the joints before the demands of the day begin. Blood begins flowing more freely. Muscles wake gradually instead of suddenly. The spine loosens. The shoulders remember their full range of motion. Nothing dramatic happens after one morning. That is precisely the point. The Japanese have always trusted the power of ordinary things repeated faithfully. One rainy morning, I asked my grandmother if she ever became tired of doing the same routine every day. She laughed. Consistency was never boring to her. Consistency was freedom. She knew her body so well because she cared for it every day, not only when something began hurting. One of my closest neighbors is now 84 years old. She still performs those same morning stretches. Not perfectly, not gracefully, but faithfully. That sentence has stayed with me. Our bodies remember everything. They remember long days sitting. They remember poor posture. They remember neglect. But thankfully, they also remember kindness. Every gentle stretch, every careful walk, every moment we choose movement instead of comfort. Researchers may describe these changes with complicated medical words. My grandmother explained them much more simply, and perhaps nowhere is that conversation more important than in the way we rest. And perhaps nowhere is that conversation more important than in the way we rest. That may sound strange. After all, isn't resting the opposite of movement? Not in the home where I grew up. My grandparents rarely rested in chairs. If my grandfather repaired a garden tool, he lowered himself into a deep squat. If my grandmother peeled vegetables, she often sat on the floor beside a low wooden table. When neighbors visited, many naturally folded themselves onto tatami mats without thinking. As children, we copied them because that was simply how life was. Only years later did I realize how much our daily environment teaches our bodies. Today, many people sit in chairs from morning until night, breakfast at a table, driving to work, working at a desk, watching television. Before long, the hips become stiff, the ankles stop bending, the knees lose confidence. The knees lose confidence. Standing up slowly becomes more difficult each year. Researchers studying healthy aging have become fascinated by one simple question. Can an older adult comfortably lower themselves to the floor and stand back up again? It sounds almost too simple, yet that single movement quietly measures flexibility, coordination, balance, leg strength, and confidence all at once. My grandfather never practiced getting off the floor. He simply lived on the floor. Without realizing it, every single day became practice for growing older. One afternoon, I asked him why he never used the empty chair beside him. He smiled and patted the tatami. The floor asks more from me. At the time, I laughed. Today, I believe he was right. Our bodies slowly become whatever we ask them to become. Ask very little, and eventually they give very little. Ask gently, consistently, and they continue surprising you for decades. That reminds me of another habit I noticed in almost every elderly person I admired. Balance. Not only balance in life, balance on one foot. My grandmother brushed her teeth standing on one leg. When I copied her, I nearly fell over. She laughed so hard that tears came to her eyes. "You are young," she teased. She smiled. At the time, I thought she was joking. Years later, I learned that balance is one of the first abilities many people quietly lose with age. Researchers Doctors have found that practicing simple balance exercises can help older adults maintain coordination and reduce the risk of falls. The movement itself isn't difficult. Stand near a wall, lift one foot slightly, breathe slowly, allow your body to make tiny adjustments. Those tiny adjustments are where the magic happens. Your ankles begin talking to your knees communicate with your hips, your core quietly wakes up. Even your brain becomes deeply involved, constantly calculating where your body is in space. Something so simple becomes a conversation between every part of you. My grandmother never needed to understand neuroscience. Again, science arrived many years after tradition, and I find something comforting about that. It reminds us that wisdom is not always discovered inside laboratories. Sometimes it begins inside ordinary homes. One of my favorite memories happened shortly after my grandfather turned 90. I found him carrying a small bundle of firewood. Not a large bundle, not a heavy one, just enough. I hurried over. He handed me only one piece. Then he carried the rest himself. Seeing the confusion on my face, he said something I have repeated to my grandchildren many times. Those words have echoed inside my heart ever since. Modern life often celebrates convenience. Everything arrives with the push of a button. Doors open automatically. Escalators replace stairs. Groceries are delivered. Machines perform work our hands once performed. Convenience is wonderful until it quietly begins stealing the small challenges that kept us strong. I am not suggesting we reject modern life. I simply believe we should not remove every opportunity for our bodies to do meaningful work. Carry your groceries. Walk to the nearby shop when you can. Stand while talking on the phone. Garden. Stretch while waiting for the kettle to boil. Little movements seem insignificant until you repeat them for 40 years. One Japanese physician whom many people admire, Dr. Shigeya Kaihinohara, often encouraged people to remain active, curious, and engaged throughout life rather than viewing aging as a reason to stop participating. I have always appreciated that idea because I have met many people whose bodies became old long after their curiosity disappeared. Protect your curiosity. It keeps more than your mind alive. There is one final lesson I want to leave with you. They expect me to name one food, one exercise, one miracle. I disappoint them every time. There isn't one. Growing older gracefully is like weaving a basket. One strand is not enough. One movement is not enough. One healthy meal is not enough. But together they become something remarkably strong. Walk a little more slowly. Stretch every morning. Sit on the floor when you comfortably can. Practice your balance. Carry something instead of avoiding every effort. Keep your body involved in your life. Most importantly, never stop believing your body is worth caring for. When I think about my grandparents today, I don't remember how old they were. I remember how they lived. I remember my grandfather pausing halfway through every walk just to watch birds gather in the rice fields. I remember my grandmother smiling while kneading dough with hands that had worked for nearly 80 years. I remember neighbors laughing together while sweeping the paths outside their homes. None of them were trying to become younger. They were simply refusing to stop living. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson Japan has ever taught me. Longevity is not about adding more years to your life. It is about adding more life to your years. One careful step, one gentle stretch, one balanced moment, one ordinary day at a time. Tonight, before you go to bed, I hope you will ask yourself one simple question. Perhaps tomorrow you can teach it once again, not through punishment, not through impossible goals, but through patience, kindness, and consistency. Because after spending my entire life here in Japan, if there is one thing I know with certainty, it is this: the people who stay strongest are rarely the ones who train the hardest. They are the ones who never stop moving in the first place. Thank you for spending these moments with me. Until we meet again, please take gentle care of yourself. Your future body is quietly listening to every choice you make today.